Friendship ended with, fuck it, L. Neil, 3 votes. Now, fuck it, P. Cripps, 3 votes is my best friend.
Ethan and Benjamin Castle are Americans. Watching the footy.
Liam Ryan saying, kick it my way, I want to jump over the pack, and here he comes! Ryan!
This is Buddy Franklin! This is the greatest showman!
Got the handball off to Myers. Myers looking for the lead of Stengel. Gee, they're good. Gee, they're sharp. Razzle dazzle Rioli.
Oh, who else? McDonald!
From inside the centre square. Boys kick the goal. Boys kick the goal. From inside the centre. I can't believe
that. Is that a cold open or a regular open?
That's a cold open.
Okay.
You can give the good time.
Good time of day, wherever you are, whenever you are. This is episode 213 of Americans Watching the Footy. I'm Ethan Castle, coming to you from South San Francisco, California.
I am Benjamin Castle, coming to you from San Diego, California.
I guess, really, it might be, you know what, fuck it, P. Cripps 2 votes, because there were a bunch of games where he kept getting 2 votes and losses, where I was like, really? If you haven't listened to or watched America's Brownlow night yet, or looked at all the data from it, do that. It was really fun. It was really labor intensive, but honestly, it was awesome.
You said Cripps got a bunch of 2s and losses. He only had 4 2s.
Well, let's see. How many of those were in losses then? He got 2 in a win over Frio that should have been a loss.
2 in the loss to Geelong.
And we had 2 for Pitnet. And they gave Walsh the 1.
In the loss to Geelong in round 7, right. The only other 2 for a loss was his 200th against the Bulldogs round 18. And checking on that, we did not give him votes in that game. Instead,
we gave Wiedering a vote.
So yeah, America's Brownlow is a thing that happened, and people actually responded, got kind of invested in it. It was nice to see for a first time we did it. I'm going to learn from it in terms of how I post about it on socials, maybe take a bit longer to post stuff too, so that people actually watch the video. It kind of depends on how we grow brand Americans Watching the Footy.
17 out of 18 fan bases agree, which is better than 4 out of 5 dentists.
Have we mentioned the Pearls Before Swine 5th dentist thing before?
Okay, this may take some splaining. So I feel like Australians would enjoy this. I don't know what the cultural impact of newspaper comics is, but I feel like Australians would appreciate the strip Pearls Before Swine, which is hysterical. I have 6 Pearls Before Swine books. It's the best comic strip. It's one of the only newspaper comics that tries to be even slightly edgy, which is still not very edgy by anyone else's standards, but it's pretty funny. And there was this whole sequence, with the 4 out of 5 dentists agree commercial. So, you had the 5 dentists at a funeral, 4 of them say, sorry for your loss. And then the 5th pokes the body and just goes yep, she's dead. All right. Also, it's World Cassowary Day, which I think is the most legitimate animal to be terrified of. But yeah, I thought, back to actual Brownlow stuff, I have no issue with Cripps winning. I thought there were 3 candidates to legitimately win it, with Cripps, Dacos, and Neil. Bontempelli a bit behind that. But at no point this year was it Patrick Cripps is going to smash the votes record. That's kind of insane. And I think that's a consensus that most of us can agree on. I think there's a very legitimate case to be made for Cripps and Dacos, and a case to be made for Neil. And I don't think too many people are bothered that Cripps won, but it's that there's no way he should have tallied that many votes. I mean, even the most generous estimates probably had him at 35? And then only 196 players tallied votes this year, which is comically low.
The umpires did exactly what we were talking about. Fuck it, blank 3 votes or whatever. Yeah, because he had 12 best on ground games. Are they just going in there just all right, Blues won, so is Cripps the 3, or do we have anything else? I know there's been cases for them trying to get access to stats to check things that
It
happened.
That's not a thing. Do they have to just like go to the locker room immediately after and just submit it?
I think.
So stupid. Like, guys, you should be able to consult things like, I don't know, disposal efficiency, contested versus uncontested possessions, score involvements, intercept possessions. Those, and I guess assists as well, are probably the stats that I looked at the most. And I think we both did. I also personally definitely put some emphasis on guys that are long, accurate kicks, whether they have good field vision or just stretch the field really nicely. Think Hayden Young.
I was going to say that does seem like a very Hayden Young thing. I generally try to form my opinions, obviously, before looking at the stats, then use those to confirm it. But it's interesting looking back and wondering, geez, did we really change how we thought of votes at some point during the season? Was there some sort of shift there? And in our first year doing this, yeah, it can be regarded as more experimental. Hopefully we will continue to refine things as we go along. Should we mention what exactly happened?
I mean, people should just go and listen to it because it was fun and good.
It actually came down to the last round, and we had no intentions of that. We just tallied the votes and immediately hit them. So the fact that it led to something entertaining, accidental, but a very happy accident. We definitely gave some more love to non-midfield positions in general. And on teams with some star defenders, like some all-Australian potential in there, it definitely had its effect. And for Carlton, Jacob Wiedering, whereas he didn't get too many votes, the ones that he did were probably games where Cripps could have easily gotten more. And yeah, Tom DeConing and George Hewitt, we definitely gave more love to. We created a whole spreadsheet, Ethan did, actually, that shows all sorts of breakdowns on our numbers against the umpires, breakdowns by team, losses, draws, all that good stuff. So find the links for that. We can probably talk about that a bit more honestly, like other side of the grand final, because I do want to get into these postmortems before it feels too late. I do have a couple of concluding thoughts before that about Brownlow stuff. Like, I don't think anyone would feel too bad if one day it became, fuck it, M. Bontempelli 3 votes, because he deserves one. Let's be real. He totally deserves one. People who only casually watch the game and people who seriously watch the game can agree that he's awesome. And this shouldn't be a hard one to figure out, guys. You know what it makes me think? I forget who said this. I'm looking this up now. It was one of our followers, the famed @Dodgy Llama, a Geelong fan who's out in Sydney. And he wondered if the AFL could follow an Allan Border medal style format in the future where it's a weighted combination of votes by coaches, players, and umpires. So the Allan Border medal for Ethan and for anybody else who doesn't know, so maybe some other Americans, it's Player of the Year in Australian men's cricket.
I mean, it's tough because on one hand, I legitimately love just the occasion of Brownlow night,
which is weird for us just because we're usually not big fans of whole awards galas like that. I'll watch the Kennedy Center honors if there's particular interest for me in some of the honorees, but I don't obsess over things like the Oscars. Grammys I'll tend to watch.
But I also just like that it's kind of a fun way to say goodbye to the season. And it's like if that episode of Survivor when, they walk down the beach and see all the people who got eliminated torches, if that was actually cool.
They haven't done that sort of walk of remembrance on American Survivor in ages.
Probably because it was ass.
Yeah, they last did it in season 26, and we're now in the middle of season 47.
Yeah, like I said, it was ass. It was something I fast-forwarded through every time.
I mean, we kind of fast-forwarded through the Brownlow just by keeping a good pace. It was around 90 minutes. Obviously, no player interviews impacted that, but we kept things moving along and even added some new stuff of our own. We talked about our Polished Turd Award. We did a substitution tracker. And yeah, it was a lot of work, mostly for me.
I mean, we both invested the time in really watching games intently. I think next year, I might even go back and watch some of the really shit games, very closely, to really make sure I put in the effort. There are a couple of games that I never really watched that I might go back and do, like the Eagles road loss to Essendon. And that one seems like a watchable, not down to the wire, but entertaining enough game. For only 196 players to get Brownlow votes is kind of nuts. Some of the underlying numbers there. First off, shouts out, of course, to Sir Swamp Thing for being the one to provide that data. And then follow-up fact from Kevin Pollard, who is a Collingwood and Arsenal fan. Like the two kind of go together. So 196 players polling, fewest since 171 in 1986. The thing is, in 1986, there were 12 clubs and 792 votes, 465 players. Now there's 18 clubs, 1,242 votes, and there were 658 players used in games.
So it's completely disproportionate.
Yeah, it's kind of out of whack. Also, just wanted to mention the irony of, one of the players that inspired us to do this thing in the first place was Rowan Marshall, who this year gets love from the umpires, but not for us, after last year getting love from us and not the umpires. I guess real quick, maybe it's worth going through the short list of, without getting into it too much, players that we valued that the umpires didn't, and vice versa.
Well, for starters, we gave Patrick Cripps 21 fewer votes.
Yeah, without going deeper into the numbers, other players that we did not value very high: Tom Green, low efficiency; Rowan Marshall, low efficiency, just kind of yeeted it; Adam Treloar, who I thought got a lot better as the year went on; Nick Martin, of course, he got 3 for that game where he had 44 and did fucking nothing.
I want to mention about Treloar. That's just also a case where it's really tough because you're going up against Bontempelli for votes constantly, and Ed Richards this year. I think out of the others,
And Libba.
less so this year. It was definitely more Richards to my in my mind there.
I'm glad that Libba got the 3 from the game against Geelong. That was correct. There are some that just like, yeah, you totally got it right. And there are some that really made no sense. I was surprised to see Ollie Wines get into double digits. Lockie Whitfield was less surprising. And then Zach Butters, we gave 8 fewer to than the umpires did. And that's mostly because of the horny one being so good.
Here he is again, the horny one.
And then, yeah, we also obviously recognize like Dan Houston a couple times. And then Nick Dacos, who we had at 30, not 38. And I think most people had him probably more like 30 than 38.
Well, Willem Drew being in that midfield mix just complicates things further for Port. I don't know how he didn't get a single Brownlow vote.
It's not like he was just tagging, and even in a tagging role, I think Toby Bedford got a couple.
We gave Willem Drew 9 total, including 3 from their round 3 loss to Melbourne. That's the game that we want to show people as like a first-time footy viewing experience, as opposed to my housemate Dana, who watched literally the 2 best finals thus far with me.
You need to reset her expectations. Maybe show her Saints Suns. I think that'll do it.
Nah, that was a close game, though.
I know, but still, more people need to be subjected to that.
Saints North 2023.
That was really the perfect storm of awful footy, between that it wasn't close but wasn't a total blowout, and just how bad it was in general. That Saints Suns game, which ended on a pretty terrible call, still deserves a lot of credit, though, as just an awful display of football. Other players we ranked very highly: Brodie Grundy, Lachie Scholl, another one with like the long distance kick ability; Bont, Tom De Koning, George Hewitt, the horny one, Brian, Lachie Neal, which is really ironic after last year, and Josh Tracy. It was weird for Ruckman. You could only get votes if you're maxed on a Rowan Marshall, apparently.
Yeah, Tristan Cherry got 1.
I thought he would have gotten far more with the amount of eating he did.
It doesn't make much sense to either of us, which is why we created our own. And I think we ended up talking more sense than a lot of people expected. So well done us. Let's run it back next year. So before we get the grand final preview itself, we do need to go through the postmortems for the teams we lost over prelim weekend. I will spin a wheel because that is what we do here.
You know what would be really fun is if you had like an actual wheel to spin, but it was just like, a steering wheel or a tire or something. Like, it's a wheel.
It's a Bible. We're actually going chronological, so it's time to talk about...
it's time to explore what we might be able to find in the port cloud.
I did not think your Frank impression would be that good. Maybe it's just it sounds better on the phone. I don't know, but I like it a lot. So Port Adelaide, 16-7, fifth best percentage, finished second on the ladder. Geelong gave them a nice red bottom in the qualifying final. Then they won a really fun semifinal over Hawthorn and then just got outclassed by the Swans in the prelim. Couple of real low points this year that certainly made this team and this fan base and Ken Hinckley the main characters on a few occasions. Getting knocked around in the first showdown, or well, dominating the midfield but sucking in both 50s. The 79-point home loss to Brisbane during the 2004 reunion, that didn't go over well with really anybody in Port World. There were rumors that, if they were going to lose to the Suns, that would be it for Ken Hinckley. And then they turned things around, finished pretty well. But I think if they had just lost a prelim, it would have been easier to stomach than getting absolutely blasted in the qualifying final. Like, if they had won the qualifying final and then lost the prelim, I wonder what the attitude would be like.
Also remember that 36 seems like a misleading margin from that prelim just because of when feet were on the gas. It felt like more than 36. But of course, the pressure had been taken off Hinckley at that point. It had already been announced. Oh yeah, he's staying on next year. This team thrives under pressure. Don't do that, Cucky.
I mean, I probably would have come to that conclusion anyway. I just don't think they should have announced it before that because of, this team seems to handle pressure pretty well.
And they tend to bring it pretty well, too. I mean, that's the hallmark of that midfield core there, which, I mean, I think at this point it's fully transitioned to being a Butters, Horn Francis, and Rosie core with assistance from the trio of Drew, probably the fourth one in there, and then flexing outside to in for Bogan Wines. And looks like Travis Boak is more likely to go around again. It's a nice thing to have those guys be your fourth, fifth, sixth options.
I know what you said. I heard Bogan Wines.
Well, you know what? Would that be a very Echuca thing?
I guess so, yeah. I feel like they could slap the bag there.
I don't know what your obsession is with Echuca.
Braden Cox talks about it a bunch on the Mason Cox show, and it just seems like a very funny, rednecky place. So here's the thing with Port. On one hand, finishing second and making a prelim is very good. On the other, that's kind of been the expectation for a while, and they still haven't broken through. And Ken Hinckley has now coached more games than any other coach to not make a grand final.
And more than anyone else at Port. This doesn't seem like complacency. It feels like, they made some moves, but mediocre pieces bring mediocre results.
Mediocre?
And the biggest improvement to the defense list-wise was the midseason addition of Logan Evans, who, especially in the absence of Dan Houston and Kane Farrell later in the year in finals, showed well. Got rattled a couple times, but tended to bounce back from it. And you've got this very capable ball-moving group developing there onto the flanks and wing with Josh Sin and my sleeper, Jace Burgoyne, who was leaps and bounds above what I expected this year.
I think some of the criticism of this team should probably be directed towards list management, and I don't feel like there's been much of that at all, where it's just like, they brought in some underwhelming pieces. Although I will say, Zerk Thatcher had moments. He had a lot of moments, some very good, some very bad, and Asaba just did very Asaba things, but also actually showed some better kicking accuracy when he went forward. Because a lot of times when he did forward work at Geelong, it was great. He's a great mark, like, oh, fuck, don't have him kick anything. And I was kind of figured some of that part out. So there's progress. It's just like, you've got an aging forward group, at least, Charlie Dixon retiring. That's a big one.
And Charlie Dixon is a player that we very quickly came to like because, he was one of the most powerful forwards when we started watching. 2020 and 21 was like the end of his peak. And I feel like we made like Calvin Johnson comparisons at times with him.
I am glad that he's calling it now instead of trying to play out one more year. Having already been dropped at one point this year, I think it would have just been wrong for him to, it would not have been pretty if he had gone after another season, I really think. So as much as I enjoy him, I'm glad that he's going out on like a more graceful note than he would if he gave it one last go. Hopefully that means more deserved opportunities for Todd Marshall and Mitch Georgiadis.
Now let's see about Marshall. I wonder if there's going to be some concussion panel stuff for him, given, 6 in the past 2 years now? Georgiadis, he will get those opportunities. He naturally will. And he was their leading goal kicker this year, actually, with 44.
At times this year, I was confused by the forward structure because, there were some games where you'd get a lot of Willie Rioli and some games where he was hardly involved at all. And I guess maybe that's an off-season project, just to try to figure out more about just what are they trying to do with that forward group? Because it's a group that at times is really, really good, but it doesn't seem like there's a ton of consistency. And then defensively, they just probably still need one more heavy hitter in there. Obviously, geography does kind of restrict them generally from some of the guys that they probably want. But if Tom Barris was going over there, I would think, oh yeah, here we go.
I mean, even somebody like Harry Perryman could go a long way for him. As of now, it looks like Collingwood is more favored. Trying to figure out the new forward group, though, I mean, it's further complicated by the questions about Marshall and then trading, because Ollie Lord is being looked at by a couple Victorian teams. Meanwhile, they'll be bringing in Jack Vinda Lukosius.
A lot of people seem to think he sucks, just gauging public perception. I actually had liked what Lukosius had done this year at times. I mean, he's good for just massive games against Geelong, which is really annoying. But also, he had some games where they kind of dropped him into a halfback role, and he actually looked pretty good there. Not that I think, at least assuming players are healthy, that'll be much of a need for Port. But it's nice to have that up your sleeve. I look at them, and even assuming Dan Houston's gone, between Logan Evans and some of the others, I think Josh Sinn's development there, you're not going to have too many issues.
Just want to see Lukosius on a better team to begin with.
He is one, though, you'd like to see more, and I've said this about Lukosius before, you'd like to see him put up a few more 2-goal games, because it seems like it's either 1, 0, or 5 with no in between.
What are you talking about? Literally in the final 13 rounds of the season, and he didn't even play in all those? Yeah, in his final 9 games this year, he kicked exactly 2 goals 6 times.
Oh.
So maybe he's getting there. It might be because he had a really slow start to the season in terms of kicking accuracy, and then he turned it on, obviously, for 5 goals straight against Geelong up in Darwin and kept it up. You see, I think there's just a real negative connotation around him because he's been this somewhat inconsistent player and a high draft pick for the Suns in particular.
I think this is also a team where the kind of fringe guys, the Francis Evans, Quentin Narkle, the former Cats, basically, it was a lot of interchangeable Matt, and you don't want that. That's never what you want. So that's something else that'll need to be addressed in time.
From this offseason for Port, remember how they got those 2 rucks? And we thought, Soto will be the first guy, Sweet will get some time. That kind of totally flipped around midseason, and Jordan Sweet just looks legit. Meanwhile, Yvonne Soldo is looking to go back home and have a secondary role, perhaps with the Saints, which is perfect. We talked about that last time.
Yeah, I think that's such a good fit. Soldo's such an interesting player because he's got a lot of versatility, and I just think, I don't know how much of it's been him not finding the role and how much of it's teams not finding the role, but the upside's there, and he's going to keep getting opportunities. It's just, at some point, you don't want to be, obviously, a guy that plays on a billion teams, because that probably means for one reason or another you don't stick. I just want to see someone that can figure out what to do with him, and I wouldn't be surprised if Ross Lyon is that guy. What I'd like to see is for Ross Lyon to use his versatility, because we've seen how well Ross creates different game plans and matches up with different teams, so I hope he doesn't try to kind of box Soldo into one role, which I think is something that they kind of made the mistake of doing at Port this year.
As much as I like Charlie Dixon, I would have often had Soldo playing ahead of him. I would have had Soldo playing in the front ahead of Radagolea there, for example. I already mentioned my sleeper pick was Jace Burgoyne, and so impressed by the progress he made this year. I thought he was going to be spending some more time at the Sandful. Instead, really established himself on the wing. He averaged 18 touches and close to 5 marks. pretty aggressive player at times in the mold of his father Peter and his uncle Sean. And I love that in the semifinal, when they needed him to shift, he was seamlessly able to go back to the halfback flank and then follow play up ground to get a goal as well. That was just a really rewarding game from a pure viewing standpoint, having picked out this guy to do bigger things this year. You've also got a father-son as your sleeper.
I've got Jackson Mead, who played in every game for Port this year, so that's a first for him. He had played 18 games over the prior 2 years combined. This year he was in all 26, subbed in 3 times, subbed out once. I kind of just think of him as a corridor player in general, like fitting himself into different parts of the ground up the middle. He had a couple of games with really good contested possession numbers. I don't think we gave him any votes.
Neither we nor the umpires gave Mead votes. We gave Jace Burgoyne a couple votes when the umpires did not give him any. Those Burgoyne votes came from their round 7 win over the Saints.
A round 9 win at Geelong, I thought he was pretty good. Didn't get any coaches' votes, but fared pretty well.
You're talking about Mead there, yeah, because I think Burgoyne missed that Geelong game. It was the Saints game and then the meeting with Hawthorn. Of course, Burgoyne does big things in a Port Hawthorn game that stood out to us before this finals. And then just the versatility he showed in the semis was really encouraging.
I don't think Jackson Mead got any coaches' votes, but he definitely cemented himself as that next dude past all the other really good midfielders. And he's someone who, at other clubs, would probably be in a more prominent role, but Port should be happy with him. And considering his history at the club, I would think he's probably not too frustrated with his role either. Seems like a good relationship all around.
You know, Benjamin, 78% of our listeners are between 18 and 35 years old, so they probably want to start a podcast like we did.
How did you know that number, Ethan?
Thanks to the analytics we have for Spotify for Podcasters.
Formerly known as Anchor, sorry Frio fans, Spotify for Podcasters has tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast from your phone or your computer. No fancy software needed.
It's so easy you can edit it while drunk.
And Spotify for Podcasters doesn't just allow you to upload to Spotify, you can also distribute your podcast on platforms like Apple, Stitcher, and more, just like we do.
Best of all, it's completely free.
Not only is it free, you can even make money from listener support or ad revenue. Hint, hint.
Download the Spotify for Podcasters app or go to podcasters.spotify.com to get started today.
Did that ad help pay the bills? Did it even play? Only you can know for sure. I think now is probably a good time to mention that we have all our socials with the handle Americans Footy. Twitter is our most active, Instagram also there, YouTube under that handle as well. If anyone tries to impersonate us on other things, cool, we made it. Individually, I am at BenjaminHK01 on socials.
I am at Castle Media, that's Castle with a K.
And the executive producer is?
Not in the room right now, but his name is Brian Harambe. He is on Instagram at catnameddbrian.
So we did one postmortem before that break there, if there was a break for y'all. We can do the other now, and because it's Geelong, I want to give my thoughts first, much how we had you do for the Eagles. So Geelong finished in third in the home and away at 15-8. They had the sixth best percentage, 112.2. After smashing Port in their qualifier in Adelaide, they ran out of steam in the second half and lost to the Brisbane Lions by 10. I like how they managed to rectify things after that midseason slide because they lost 6 of 7 after starting the year 7-0. Then they started backing up the right younger players even more than they already had, and they were able to turn some of those games that had the feeling of closer losses, and they had plenty of those results earlier in the year, into some decent wins. You think about some of the complete escapes like the one against Adelaide, and then just the better overall games that I think get overlooked because it's Geelong. We expect them to win. I think most people had this team coming back from being out of finals to at least being in the 5th through 8 range. I'm not sure how many had them going this far, but it was games like the Collingwood win in round 18, the scrappy one they had round 22 against Freo and finishing that off late, and they could have finished it off a bit earlier too. Like, those are the types of games they could not and would not have won mid-season. And the younger players that they did have come in, they'd workshopped enough in the VFL, and they immediately fit into the spots in which they were cast. Obviously, it was the most prominent year yet for Ollie Dempsey, winner of the Ron Evans medal as Rising Star. He has Harley Reid and Sam Darcy to thank for that. I think, Ethan, you would even agree on that. But Dempsey is a perfect Geelong player, bright blonde with a thin headband.
He actually thanked the tribunal in his speech, I think it was.
Zach Christian.
I did not think he was going to latch onto a role quite like that. That was pretty great. I wish they would have gotten into some of the younger guys sooner, like Lawson Humphreys, who showed just how smooth he was and how prepared he was for everything immediately. The prelim was the only game where I didn't think he was that great. And it seemed like the speed of the game and the higher pressure was a little much. But even then, he wasn't actively bad or anything. Tanner Broom took steps forward. It was nice to have him mostly healthy, though he had a wrist injury. And then he had guys like Jack Henry, who I thought at the start of the year was just awful. He got a lot better as the year went on. I think what's so impressive about this is this was a transition year, and this was not a great midfield group outside of Dangerfield, who, as the year went on, really, really upped his game. You were asking a lot out of Bruin and Bose, and you didn't get much out of either of them in the prelim, which is one of the reasons they were in costumes a couple days ago instead of next week. By the way, some great costumes. I think my personal favorite was Tom Hawkins as the pole vaulter.
You liked that over the trio of Tanner Bruin as Sam McClure, Max Holmes as a dead ringer for Mitch Cleary, and Mark Blitzovs as a far too tall Harley Reid.
Yes.
I think they're more willing to mess with other teams' jumpers than a lot of clubs. It was last year where they did the Ben Keys reenactment.
Yes, it was awesome.
I just keep thinking back to Lawson Humphreys as just such a perfect Geelong pickup. Mature ager, was nearly already 21 when he was drafted. Came from the Swan District's reserves to play 11 games this year. Fit right in, trusted with the Kiggins right away, which is some pretty high praise, especially from a coach like Chris Scott. And when Geelong needed him to be clutch, he had plenty of clutch moments. Look at the Adelaide game. He had the game-winning goal. How crazy did you go for that one? Because it was a late go-ahead goal, because it was Humphreys. I imagine that was one of your most hyped-up goals for the year that wasn't Brian Myers.
It was up there. It was really fun to see. I don't know if I've ever seen a player where the fan base just immediately loves someone like this. I've seen some other players where, fans kind of latch on over time. But the moment he played a game, this isn't, a father-son pick or anything. People were just he's perfect. He can't do anything wrong. He's got so much support, and it's pretty fun.
You contrast that with the other mature ager that they drafted this past year, my sleeper, and I'm not sure if he was the most sleepy of sleepers, but it fit for me, Sean Manna.
He was not a sleeper, honestly, but it was kind of wild that after a couple of good games, he got taken out for a while, and then he got back in, and he definitely proved that he belonged in there and probably should have been in there sooner.
Scored at least one goal in each of his final 7 games this year, including 3 in the qualifying final at Port. I also remember his 14 tackle showing round 17 against Hawthorn. He hasn't gotten into double digits otherwise, so was something just about Hawthorn that really caused that, you think?
I don't know, but I think he was just I want to prove I belong, and he definitely did that.
Nobody else in the game had more than 7.
I was trying to think about what didn't go so well for this team, because, to reach a prelim in a transition year is pretty damn good. I guess Brandon Parfit, who was one of the delistings, not playing up to what a lot of people had hoped for, and actually having opportunities this time, but not seizing them. That was definitely frustrating. Really likable guy, and it's unfortunate that he's probably going to end up somewhere else now.
This feels like such a West Coast pickup, especially a Geelong cast-off.
I guess Sam DeConing as an actual defender, not very good. He made some quick progress when he was thrust into ruck duties when Toby Conway was injured. I actually really liked what he was able to do after a couple of weeks after getting his ass kicked by his brother.
Yeah, the ruck is an interesting saga for Geelong in general, and this year there was the generally solid start for Conway. Fortunate, honestly, that Big O wasn't in there the full time against him at the Gamma. Then as he started dealing with his stress injuries, more was placed on Stanley, and he eventually was able to get it together, even though early on in the season, he was totally outdone by Dante Vicentini and subbed out in the second quarter.
I wouldn't want him playing more than like maybe 8 games next year if all goes according to plan, but that he's even going to be on for another year and that I'm not like mad about it. He did a really good, tells you how well he bounced back at the end of the year. And I think he's just someone that the players like having around too, which never hurts. I guess other than that, Cam Guthrie's health was disappointing, but when you have things like the evolution of Mitch Nevitt and the likely arrival of Bailey Smith, this all of a sudden could be a really deep midfield group. The TLDR, not bad for a transition year. Also, Brian was still very good. Not quite as many assists, but a few more goals and just a really good overall player. And tough that he didn't get more than 2 Brownlow votes. Seems kind of crazy.
Assist of the year, does he get it from the prelim, or are we going back to like the Tom Powell barrel?
I don't know.
Those are both up there along with like the 4 and 5 bounce runs from Colby McKercher and Jordan Clark. We are doing assist of the year next year and behind of the year as well, right?
Yeah.
We're going to be handing out awards like Opal hands out cuckoo clocks.
Good reference. Other couple of things I didn't get to. Towards the end of the year, Mark Blitzovs was pretty good after some disappointing stretches. 22 and 23, he was awesome. And then this year was a bit of a step back. If you get a version of him closer to the 22 and 23 versions, this could be pretty fun. And then other than that, I guess, let's see, Mitch Hardy was my sleeper pick. He didn't get a game. I was surprised that he never got one. And I'm a little surprised that he got delisted. And I hope this isn't one that they regret. Usually when this team delists someone, they know what they're doing. This one's got a few skeptics, and I understand why.
That feels like a very Crows pick up there.
He could probably do a lot of the Rory Laird type stuff, honestly.
Oh, by the way, we've learned recently that the Crows will be getting Isaac Cumming as an unrestricted free agent.
Also, there's a possible new logo for them, and it looks like shit.
You know what it makes me think of? The combination of the logo and sweaters from the 1990s Pittsburgh Penguins rebrand, specifically the black one.
See, if they went more like that, I'd be okay with it. It just looks like a griffin. And I mean, griffins are cool, but like,
logo's too angular for me.
Yeah, your team is the Crows, not the Griffins.
And then there were 2, and there is just 1. 2 teams, 1 game. We don't have to do build up. It's the fucking grand final.
It is now midnight. No one is moving as the 2 sides moving ever so closer. An MLB lockout tweet. It was awesome.
That sounds like a nightingale.
Yes, it was.
There we go. 2022 MLB lockout. Sydney Swans, Brisbane Lions. Y'all know the time. 2:30 p.m. local. For Americans, 12:30 a.m. Eastern Saturday morning. 9:30 p.m. Pacific Friday night on Fox Sports 1. Hopefully they don't cut away again, like right after the final siren, but they probably will. So, I don't know, see if you can find the Channel 7 feed, or just have Watch AFL to get the full presentations.
Yeah, I unfortunately will not be seeing everything live, because big high school football game, which I would not be going to if the Cats had won, but they didn't. So I'm just a little disappointed that I'm not going to be watching the pregame stuff, the parade, the concert. I'll be able to go back and watch. Not the biggest thing to me.
We're not the biggest Katy Perry fans here. However, the pregame show is always something to watch.
And I point this out every year, how much better the grand final is for having a pregame concert instead of a halftime concert. Because, NFL halftime is normally like 12 to 15 minutes, and then for the Super Bowl, it's 45 minutes. It's very dumb.
I honestly wonder sometimes if it might be better to have the parade at halftime.
I mean, can you get it all done within the 20 minutes?
I don't know. They've done walks around for single players and stuff during all that, so it's a matter of pace there. Maybe you'd have to extend it by 5 minutes at most. I don't know, because the difficulty is if you do it pregame, the stands aren't full. If you do it at halftime the stands aren't full.
You have the cars go around like really fast. Does that make like a NASCAR lap?
Just get like Daniel Ricciardo and Oscar Piastri to start driving them all. Gonna be tough to top Robbie Williams from 2022. He set a pretty high bar.
I thought last year's was decent, but it wasn't as good. And I'm not, like an acclaimed music critic or anything, or, a famous historian.
Or an austere religious scholar.
So these teams did meet once this year, round 19. A 2-point Lions win where they led by 22 after a quarter, trailed by 15 after 3, came back and won.
I'm so pumped that we get this matchup again, looking back at this game. There was so much that hinged on stoppage success in this game. Sydney ended up tilting that in their favor in the second quarter, and Errol Golden off stoppage was brilliant. And then, even with Golden quieting Lachie Neal for much of the proceedings, Brisbane put together the team effort in the fourth, and it was Hugh McCluggage and Cam Rayner at ground level who really did it. Did Rayner get love for that game? He somehow did not. 2 goals from 20 and 7 tackles, 6 clearances. I mean, his goals were earlier, but he propelled so much in the fourth quarter, and he got nothing from it. McCluggage getting the 3, I can understand.
But yeah, some of the others don't make much sense. Rayner was awesome, and another one who got a bit underrepresented at times. Really liked the way he played.
The big things with Sydney in this game was their third quarter inaccuracy. They kicked 2-6, and then starting in the second quarter, bunch of injuries. Dane Rampy did his calf, so did Tom Papley. Will Hayward somehow played through an ankle injury and hasn't missed a game even after that to have a really big impact. And honestly, had the Swans won, I probably would have just kept talking about it as the Will Hayward game. So I'm glad that they're able to run this one back. These teams have not met in finals in 21 years since the first prelim in 2003 out at Stadium Australia. That was a 44-point Lions win and a real team win because no Brisbane player had more than 23 disposals. They last met in the grand final 125 years ago. And oddly, the AFL is acknowledging that despite not counting Fitzroy's flags within the Brisbane Lions. And that's a mess there. But yes, in 1899, a throng of 4,823 braved the rain to watch the VFL Grand Final at Junction Oval, and Fitzroy was victorious by a single point, 3-9-27 to 3-8-26 over South Melbourne. I wish footage from that survived just so we could see the differences between that game and footy now.
Oh, this was something that was pointed out to me that I meant to talk about. Thank you to McKay Bay Beers, or maybe Mackay Bay Beers. I hope Mackay, because then it would rhyme better, for tweeting at us as part of the America's Brownlow Night things. I love the men at work in the background. Nice Vegemite sandwich handball. And I never noticed in the video that the guy handballs a Vegemite sandwich. And I just think that's the funniest thing.
Never noticed either. Maybe just because I, don't regularly think about that video. And it felt very necessary to have Down Under in there at some point. Some great stuff just looking at the team selection. Just one change, which is Darcy Fort in for Oscar McInerney after McInerney dislocated his shoulder twice in the first half of the prelim. Firstly, what an opportunity for Fort. Don't think he's even gotten close to 50 games for his career. This will be his 36th game and his second ever final.
Only the third game he'll be playing this entire season. He does have a behind this year. I loved when he was just the guy who didn't kick a behind, but he also did have a 4-assist game last year during the
Gather round.
I guess maybe this kind of has Stephen King 2007 vibes to it, because King only played 6 games that year, including the grand final when he was a surprising but effective recall. So huge opportunity there. Ford against Grundy. I think it's going to be a lot more about reading and responding to Grundy's hitouts. So that's going to be fun seeing him control the game, and a year of redemption for Brodie Grundy as well. Starting it against the team that never used him properly.
I think that was just never a great fit for him.
No, he's got to be the guy there.
It just never worked and wasn't a great fit.
I'd like to thank Cody Atkinson and Sean Lawson, the ABC duo, with their great articles for pointing out that neither team in this grand final has a player from the opponent's state. There are 6 New South Wales natives playing for the Swans and 7 Queenslanders for the Lions, and none going the other way for each. So
Kind of almost a state of origin.
yeah, this is close enough to state of origin at the G, although we already had the Lions involved in a state of origin game this year. Who can forget Alex Neil-Bullen's try and Hugh McCluggage's conversion?
We needed to have the very dumb-sounding whistle.
So I was curious to look at how the players from each team got onto that list, because with teams coming from the northeastern states, your first thought is, oh, this is all academies. Each team has 4 players on whom they had to bid in the draft playing for them in this grand final. For the Swans, it's Isaac Heaney, Nick Blakey, Braden Campbell, and Errol Goulden. Love that Campbell's getting backed in. For the Lions, it's Harris Andrews, Eric Hipwood, and then Will Ashcroft and Jasper Fletcher. The chance for Ashcroft, I absolutely love after such a close loss last year and making that run without him. You know, there's a thought, could he be what gets him over the top? And also just the fact that these are the teams who lost the past 2 grand finals in the first place. There are only, I think, 3 premiership players on these rosters overall.
I got a question. If you're the Swans, what do you do with James Jordan?
I was about to ask that to you, because I'm not sure if you want to repeat having Golden on Neil, or if you do want that, and then you'd have Jordan as like a second option. And I think Achi is the wrong sort of matchup for him, but I'm not sure where else he could go defensively. So I feel like it's either he's in the middle or he's just playing freely.
Well, I loved Achi's forward work.
I think you could have some excellent defensive forward work in this game between Achi and Hayward. Achi will be going up against, would he try to get to McCartan then?
Maybe you have him go on to like Blakey. What about that? What about Blakey?
Those are 2 very diametrically opposed players to me in terms of ground versus air.
I know, but like matchup wise, at least in terms of like body type and skill set, I feel like that would be the more like for like option.
And then Hayward, obviously, to Andrews.
Yeah, that seems pretty self-explanatory.
And then Jack Payne, I guess, is most likely to play on Joel Marty.
And then what, Lester against McDonald?
Yeah, Lester against McDonald, and on the Spall side, I'm salivating at the thought of Tom Papley going up with Brandon Starcevich. Oh, how quickly, like, give me a time on thing for like how quickly Papley and Zorko will get to each other.
I want to say 25 minutes.
Negative 14 seconds.
Late first quarter, I think it really happens.
I think there will be some stuff even before the game starts. I find it interesting that Connor McKenna has been named at full back.
As opposed to like as a sub?
Yeah, he's been the sub for all 3 finals. I'm not sure if that's something that they would on the bench. And the way the bench looks right now, Lohman, Achi, Morris, Starcevich, Answorth. I mean, I don't like any of those as real sub picks. I wouldn't like Answorth being demoted. I think Answorth has sneakily been a very strong player this final series, having that secondary small role a lot of the time, able to fill in pressure-wise too. So I think it'd be pretty hard done by for Answorth to be the sub, and I don't think Logan Morris is the right move.
Now, I don't think Answorth has been quite as good as the stats suggest, but I've liked him. So yeah, that would be pretty difficult.
For the Swans, it feels like it's a pretty obvious one with Robbie Fox being the sub again. If it worked last week, you don't need to tweak things. You know, there is the allure of having the fresh leg of someone like Braden Campbell late.
Or Taylor Adams.
He is not even an emergency.
Yeah, that's nuts. Then I think the odds of a late change in this seem really, really low.
The emergencies going each way. Francis, Laddams, and Cleary for the Swans, and Sharp, Smith, and Joyce for the Lions.
I don't think we get a late change unless someone's like hurt.
But yeah, I was running the numbers on just how each team acquired their players. You have 4 bids each way. The Lions have done a lot more trading to get their bigger names. Dane Zorko was actually a trade acquisition because in 2011 he was a zone selection of the Suns and was traded on. So that's one you can include there, along with the likes of Cameron, Neal, Achi, Danaher, and Dunkley. Oh, and I guess Darcy Ford.
I love that the site Roster Resource does stuff like that. I would love to have a Footy version of this, and it would also be easier to maintain because they don't really have too many mid-season changes other than, the mid-season draft.
I've been using Footy Wire to confirm draft history, so that's a good place to start. So yeah, the Lions with 11 open draft picks, all of which are from 2016 or later, except for Ryan Lester, 2010.
If the Lions were to win it, he would definitely be one of the feel-good stories there.
They really hit on it when they had to in 2017. Home the spoon. From that draft alone, Rayner, Bailey, Starcevich, Payne.
Yeah, that'll work.
And they'd also got McCluggage and Barry the year before that. So, I mean, they were priming themselves. And for the 2021 draft, Darcy Wilmot and Kyle Lohman as first rounders, they nailed both of those. Lohman was my sleeper for the Lions this year. I called him a sleeper just because he was somehow still rising star eligible, which blew my mind considering the flashes we'd seen at the reserve level. So the Lions had 11 open draft picks, 4 bids, 7 trades, and 1 supplemental. The supplemental being?
Logan Morris?
No, he was second rounder this past year, McKenna.
Oh, okay.
Remember, McKenna went back to Northern Ireland, to County Tyrone, and helped them win an All-Ireland Senior Championship after the whole Essendon fallout. The Swans, meanwhile, have feasted on the draft. 16 players from the open draft, and 7 of them, all drafted between 2011 and 17, were rookie draft picks. All of Harry Cunningham, Jake Lloyd, Dane Rampy, Lewis Melkin, Tom Papley, Robbie Fox, and Joel Lombardi came to the Swans through the rookie draft. That is impeccable scouting and development. You can say what you want about the academy getting them a few of those top-level guys. I mean, 3 All-Australians this year, but that just speaks more to the development pathway. And then just 1 trade and 1 free agent acquisition, which were both from Melbourne this past year with Grundy and Jordan. And Hayden McLean was a supplemental pickup. But it's draft success versus ruthlessness and trades in a large part for the Lions, and then hitting on draft hauls at just the right time. It feels more like a longer-term project for the Swans, which makes sense given their consistency over the past decade plus. Meanwhile, it's crazy to think, us coming into the game in 2020, going back and realizing just a couple years prior, the Lions were a laughingstock.
After looking at this, I don't think either of these teams really have the size of an advantage that some would probably associate with them based off of their state, and that both of them have been able to build such sustainable success models with pretty challenging circumstances as not only non-Victorian clubs, but non-Victorian clubs in a state where football kind of takes the back seat. That deserves to be applauded and recognized.
I think the big talk about this game is around chaos versus control.
Chaos, control.
And I think Sydney is the team that's more willing to invite the chaos, whereas Brisbane, you see the uncontested mark totals there. How do you see that all shaking out? How much stock are they going to take from that first meeting?
I was thinking about this in kind of the lens of like what happens in uncontested sequences and what happens in contested sequences. And I think the question that this really boils down to, really the flow of this whole game, is like, will the Swans let the Lions rack up uncontested marks? And I would think no. Everyone's aware of the Lions usually win if they get to triple-digit marks. The Swans do a good job creating chaos and forcing mistakes out of teams. And while the Lions can play at that pace too, I think the Swans would be happier to make the Lions do more of that than they traditionally do.
So you're saying like a Tom Papley Norm Smith medal feels more likely than a Cam Rayner Norm Smith?
I guess so. I was going to eventually ask, if you can't pick someone who has a single coach's vote so far in finals, who wins the medal? Like someone who absolutely comes out of nowhere. And I think the obvious answer would have to be Brodie Grundy.
The last time a ruck won the Norm Smith. Genuinely good question.
Otherwise, I guess Logan McDonald. And then for Brisbane, they really spread their votes around pretty well. So I guess, Kai Lohman.
I had that thought as well, that Lohman could pop up and, kick 4 or 5, and in what is very much a team game the rest of the way, have a Bobby Hill-like path to the Norm Smith medal, and I would be extremely happy for that. You know what, next? No. for the purposes of creating the greatest Macazat ever, Logan Morris.
Has a player ever swept like all the votes for the Gary Ayers Medal? Or I guess it's a pretty recent award, isn't it?
You're talking like getting all 35 or 45, depending on how many finals they play?
Yes, because I could see that happening with Isaac Heaney.
I'm not sure if it ever has. My guess would be no.
He certainly has a chance to.
Dusty got 28 in 2020, but I think he also played 4 finals. Yeah, because they lost that qualifier.
Correct.
Yeah, we haven't had anything close to a sweep.
Yeah, I think that's not entirely out of the question. The form Heaney showed those last couple games, he's pretty ridiculous right now.
He's kind of that guy right now. But I want it for the Macca's commercial, like a big, if the Lions are to win it, a big Logan Morris moment.
Yes.
We honestly need a Logan Morris meal. Barbecue Angus and a frappe. I think the nuggets might be a little much.
Like, I love the ad with like all the players in it that includes Brian, but like, how do you not just make an ad with Logan Morris about that day?
Buy some 60-second spots back and make it happen. Does that kind of bridge into the main character pick? Because I do want it to be Logan Morris, honestly. I feel like the Swans win is the more likely outcome, obviously. Current line puts Sydney -3.5.
That seems low to me. I'm going to go, like, if we have to go for a player main character, I think I'm going to go on the Lions side here, even though I don't expect them to win, just because he always finds himself in the spotlight, whether he does something or something happens to him, and that's Dane Zorko.
What if it's off the oval or just non-playing?
Like Oscar McInerney's absence, or?
I don't think Big O could be a main character, though.
All right, well, my other thing I was going to go with was locusts.
Does Australia get locusts this time of year?
I don't know, but, you know, maybe Pharaoh did something to anger God.
All right, we'll go with that. And yeah, think about locusts as you get ready to watch the grand final, wherever you end up watching it. I'll be in LA at the LA Dragons watch party with our friend Rick and my classmate and friend Nick.
I'll be at home with Brian Harambe, at least probably around when the second quarter rolls around. And what I think I want to do is watch it live, and then I'll go back and do notes, I guess. I'm not sure.
I don't know. At least you're safe inside your mind.
Don't forget, we are available, as always, on Twitter at Americans Footy, also on YouTube and Instagram under that name. I am on Instagram, and actually, I mean, I guess if you want to see me on Instagram, Ethan R. Castle, but more importantly for this, I am on Twitter at Castle Media.
I am at Benjamin HK01. The executive producer is on Instagram at Cat Named Brian. I love just his chattering, and even just the sound of his bell makes me miss him. So whenever I'm back home, probably for Thanksgiving week, I will spend as much time with that animal as possible.
I put up a video of him chirping at some lights reflected on the wall, so you should watch that.
All right, thanks. Good time of day. Enjoy the grand final. Or don't. Whose fan base actually would get the least joy out of this grand final? Probably the Giants?
Probably. I mean, depends on the outcome, but yeah.